Hello friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. In last video we learned how to perform generic load. Today we will see a practical example of generic load. Even though generic load is not frequently used, in few scenarios it is very useful function. First of all, I will show you sample data. For a finance company, we are getting transaction data something like this. So every day they are sending us transaction in a text file, and the name of the file is transaction underscore data underscore the date of that particular file. So here this file represents 28th of March 2022. For every new transaction, they are creating record something like this. So this record is showing transaction reference, date and time, client ID, client name, what type of transaction, it is credit transaction or debit transaction, and the amount. So every new transaction you will get something like this, and this file is something like that. You will get one file for each day. Currently I have only 7 days data, but there will be data for many number of days. So how to load this data and convert them in a proper format? I will show you step-by-step process of how to perform this one. First of all, I will load one file, and you can see this is how the file is. So what I will do is I will use fixed record here, so the data will appear as it is, and I don't want the first line, so I will say something like this. Header is one line, and now I will give name. I will say temp 1 underscore data, and will reload this, and I will generate a sheet here and will say a table and my record. I will increase the size little bit and I will say 20. Okay, so the data is something like this. But if you see the file, this data belongs to one client, this data belongs to other client. I need to maintain the order of this data load. So I can do something like this. I can say row number as ID, and I will reload and I will add ID here, and I will sort the data by ID. So now it is coming in proper order by the way it is already in the source file. So first thing is done. So now instead of this, I can use star and I can load every single files. So now you can see all 7 files getting loaded, and the data you can see it from here. Now the second step is I need to separate this attribute and its value. So to do that, I will perform another load. This time it will be resident load, and I will say load star, and then I will say my subfield of this field. Now it's better to give this field name as a data field. So subfield of this data, and subfield will be based on column, and the first subfield of 1 as my field name, and same way subfield of 2 is my field value. So I will say value, and I will say resident of my temp 1 data, and I will drop my temp 1 table. We'll see the output now. So ID and my data field and field name and value name. Okay, so I have separated something here, but you can see there is a space between column and field value and field attribute name. So what I can do here is I can use trim function here, to remove the unnecessary space, and here as well. And now I will load it. So now I am getting proper output. I also don't want this first line, new transaction. So what I can do here is I will use where clause here. I will say where my data field greater than 0. I will reload this. So you can see empty value is now removed. Okay, I will remove this where clause and we'll see what I mean to say. Number 8, line number 8, we don't have any record here. I need to remove those records. So I will use this where clause. So first thing is done, all empty lines removed now, and now I have to remove this as well. So I will perform another where clause and I will say wildmatch data field this, and instead of this dash I will use star here, so it will work as wildmatch, and I will say not. So now it is also removed. So now we have proper data. My next step is to group by client. So to do that I will perform another resident load, this time temp3 data, and I will say load star and resident of my temp2, and I will drop my temp2 table, and here I will say if my row number is 1, my first row, then I will say 1 and I will say record number. We will see what the output we are getting. So here I will put my record number, and you can see that we have removed few lines, so the ID is changed now. So the ID is not starting from 1, and also we can see that the number 8 is missing, number 16 is missing, something like that. So it's better to recreate this ID. So here I will say my ID is like that, and I will say my data. So now ID will start from 1. So record number is 1. So this record number is for the first transaction. So the first transaction will run until we will get transaction reference 2. So this all records is for transaction 1. So I can add few things more here. I can say if field name equal to transaction reference, this transaction reference. So this field name is transaction reference, then whatever my previous record number, so my previous record number is coming from this using the pick function. So I will add my previous record number and 1. So if the previous record number is 1, which is coming from the pick function, it will add 1 and it will make it 2. If it is 2, then it will make it 3. So if field name is transaction reference, then it will add 1 in the record number, means it will create new records. Otherwise I have to use the same record number, and I have to close second time because we have used to if function. And now we'll see, you can see now the first record number is belongs to first transaction, second is belongs to second transaction, and so on. So now we have how many number of transactions? 190. You can select any record number and you will get the respective field names and its value. So after this we can perform generic load here. So to perform generic load I need at least 3 columns. I will say generic load and I will use generic prefix here, generic load based on my record number, based on my field name and field value, resident of temp3 data, and I will load it and we'll see how many tables get created. How many different types of attribute values are there? So if you see the attribute value, we have 6 different attribute values: amount, client ID, client name, transaction date, transaction reference and transaction type. So 6 different tables, generic tables getting created. So these tables are like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Now next step is to combine them and create a single table. So to do that, we will perform the same step which we have performed in the previous generic load video. To save our time, I will copy from the previous video because the script is same now. So this is my script from the previous video. So we have created a final table, and instead of distinct key, we have record number here, and this will create all the table names. This will do the left join of all the tables to the final table. And now I don't need my temp3 table. I don't need table list table. And I will reload this application and we'll see the data model. We should have now only one table, which is a final table. And you can see how we are getting the output. Now if we see the final output, I will create a final table and I will add all columns here. So it's record number, client ID, client name, transaction date, transaction reference, transaction type and amount. So you can see from the final output that we have something wrong in a transaction date. The transaction date should be something like this. You can see here. So the issue is we have used colon as subfield separator, and our date and time function is also having colon. So what I can do here is I will try to use -1 here, and we'll see that we are getting output something like this. So in this case, now we are getting 17 PM. So we are still missing this 01, the hour portion. We are getting minute, PM, 28 March 2022. So to avoid that issue, we can use like this. We are giving space after and before colon sign, because if you see our data, we don't have space here between hour and minute, but we have space before the field name and field value. So now this should, and here also I can apply. So this should resolve our issue. So now you can see we have proper transaction date and time. Now the last step is I need to convert this transaction date in a proper date and time. So to do that, I will do another resident load, and this time I will say data table, and I will say load star resident my final table, and here I will use no concatenate, and I will say drop table final table, and instead of star I will use one by one all the fields. So first one is my record number, then I will say client ID, client name, client ID, client name, and then transaction date, and transaction reference. I will do one thing. I will just export this table. Okay, and it will make my work easy. And I will copy this transaction date up to amount, and I will mention everything here. So transaction date is done, transaction reference, transaction type, and amount. Everything is there now. So when transaction type equal to credit, this should be positive and debit should be negative. So I can say here if transaction type equal to credit, then amount, otherwise minus amount. And I will keep as a number format, and I will rename as amount. And this transaction date I will say timestamp, and my transaction date is in this format: hour, minute, it's AM PM, and then DD MMM YY. This is my format, and I want to convert to proper timestamp format. So I will use the formatting function timestamp, and I will say transaction date time. And by doing the preceding load, I will say date floor of my transaction date time will give me transaction date, and time fraction of my transaction date time will give me transaction time. And now I will again reload the application and will add this field there. So transaction date time, and here the name should be transaction date. Transaction date time, transaction date, and transaction time. So now we have everything. So this is how we can use generic load. Generic load is not frequently used, but in certain cases it is very useful. Hope you like this video. Please do subscribe my channel. Thanks and have a good day.